guys, this is Lauren Hollows for NOI Education Services, and we are starting our TAS series today. So we're going to take a little bit of a different approach for this because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at the current RTO standards, and we're also going to be looking at the new RTO standards in relationship to about 5 or 6 different areas of your training and assessment strategy. And then considering that in terms of potentially maybe some tweaks that you need to make, or some adaptations, or just things that you need to consider when you're rewriting your TAS or updating them for 2024. Certainly that all of my RTOs, all of NOI's RTOs at the moment are in the process of looking at new TASs for the following year. And we want to make sure that we're taking that into account with the standards, even though we're still technically a year out from the standards being implemented. We want to be able to think about this because if you're going to be going through audits next year, then the types of changes that have been made to the standards are potentially some of the things that auditors are going to be asking about and touching on. So I think that this is a really worthwhile activity just so that we can start to develop as we move forward. So we're going to be talking about amount of training first up. Obviously, the reason why we tackle amount of training is just generally because it's one of the areas that is I'm not going to say picked on, but I'm definitely going to say discussed at audit. It's also definitely an area that comes up for regular rectification. And I think it's an area that RTOs in general struggle to clearly articulate in their training and assessment strategy. So particularly differentiating between training and assessment. And there certainly are changes that have been made to the standards in relation to this. So I think it's really, really worthwhile to bring that up. So I'm just quickly going to read the current standard. It's focused really on 1.1, 1.2 of the current RTO standards. So if you pull up the user guide and you go to those standards, that's where you're going to be looking at. And basically it says the RTO training and assessment strategies and practices include the amount of training they provide, are consistent with the requirements of the training package, and enable each learner to meet the requirements for each unit of competency or module in which they're enrolled. Okay, 1.2 says the RTO determines the amount of training they provide each learner with regard to the existing knowledge, skills, and experience of the learner, the mode of delivery, and where a qualification is not being delivered, the number of units or modules being delivered as a proportion of the qualification. I think that's really poor because if we look at 2 Cert 3s, for example, you can look at a Cert 3 in business, which might be 10 units. You can look at a Cert 3 in like the AUR or engineer, like electro technology training package, and you could have 30 or 40 units, same qualification, very different depth and breadth of training. So I mean, in an ideal world, I think that the standards would probably be that the RTO provides like sufficient training to the depth and breadth of the training package or the units of competency in which they are enrolled, some sort of language to that extent. However, it is what it is. Under the new standards, it fits all under standard 1.1. The actual term amount of training has been removed, which I'm sure some people thought was a really good thing. However, I don't know whether or not they're going to be any happier with the new language. So 1.1 basically says the training delivered is engaging and well-structured and enables learners to attain skills and knowledge consistent with the training product. So I think that component of enables learners to attain skills and knowledge consistent with the training product is important. Obviously, the fact that it says the training delivered is engaging and well-structured is a massive departure from what we have seen before. And it certainly is a result of the feedback of people saying, we want to focus more on training. We believe that, we are a training industry. And the regulation has been so heavily focused on assessment that a lot of RTOs have had to sacrifice training to ensure assessment was, I guess, quote unquote, sufficiently delivered. Now, I would make an argument, and as I think many people I know would, and like just top of my mind, Mark Miles, Jason Ash, Brett O'Connor, Nick Thomas, whose interview series will be coming out very shortly. All of these people who are very, very passionate about training and believe in the importance of training. They would make an argument that if you design assessment well enough, and this is our argument, if you design assessment well enough, then actually you don't need to sacrifice training for assessment. But you have to design the assessment well so that you have time to actually do the training as well. Anyway, 1.1C. So 1.1C is going to be the main driver from an audit performance assessment perspective in relationship to amount of training. And what that says is the training is structured and paced to support learners to progress, providing sufficient time for instruction, practice, feedback, and assessment. So there's a lot in that one particular clause. So I'm just going to go through that again. Training is structured and paced to support learners' progress, providing sufficient time for instruction, practice, feedback, and assessment. And I would sincerely hope that none of the language in there is unfamiliar to everyone, but realistically, that process of instruction, practice, feedback, and assessment is absolutely at the heart of vocational education and training. So we talk about, we instruct, we talk about it, we maybe demonstrate it. We then give the learners an opportunity to practice. We provide them with some feedback on whether or not that was, correct, tweaks that they need to make, ways that they can do it better. And then we assess them on it. I will go so far as to say that certainly in particular areas of vocational education and training, and I'm naming them as job seeker, CRICOS, and short courses, high-risk courses, that is not present across all RTOs. That is probably the hallmark of the point of difference between a quality and a non-quality RTO as to whether or not learners who do not have the skills, okay, this is not traineeship and apprenticeship, this is not existing worker, this is in areas where students do not have the experience or skills, go straight into assessment after instruction alone. And it occurs that it is instruction, and quite often that might be instruction in a non-engaging way. So instruction, for example, via some dry online materials, through written materials, straight into assessment. So we skip the practice and feedback section, which is training. That is the reason why ASQA and other regulators have gone so hard on training in the last couple of years, is because they see consistently when they audit high risk and non-compliant providers that there is no training provided. Okay. This is not something that stands out in traineeship and apprenticeship, and primarily that's because they're working in industry. There are exceptions. I'm not going to say that, but generally there is more training that occurs. And it also occurs far more in the school sector as well. In fact, I would argue a lot of school programs spend a huge amount of time on training, well above nominal hours. And what they've done poorly in the past is the assessment component. But certainly from a training hours perspective, when I look across TASs, when I audit TASs, much higher hours of training when it comes to the schools and when it comes to workplace training for traineeships and apprenticeships, when it comes to when it comes to other sectors like short courses, like CRICOS, that's where I tend to see a lot less. We shift from like a 70-30 model to a 30-70 model, where 70% is assessment, 30% is training. And the vast majority of that training seems to be theoretical as opposed to, just And there's definitely a cost element to that. I'm not going to dispute that. But when you are thinking about your planning for your next TAS, you are going to have to consider that loop, okay? That loop of instruction, practice, feedback, assessment. There is going to have to be that design element built into that program. So that is going to be a change for a lot of people. I think in a worst case regulation scenario, we're going to have to see columns in the units for like, this is when we do instruction, this is when we do practice, this is when we do feedback. Now, I don't see, to me, practice and feedback go hand in hand. They're absolutely done like as a loop. And certainly when we design some assessments, not all, but when we design assessments, particularly like at a cert AQF4 to AQF8 level, project work, that the project assessment, definitely all like the practice feedback assessment is like a loop, and it would be very hard to pull them apart from each other. It's going to differ depending on the qualification, but considering that loop is going to be very important. The other thing that you guys are going to have to consider when we come to the new standards is just the overarching component to that. And I do recommend that you download and you look at the new standards. The training delivered is engaging and well structured. Again, this is probably not an area of strength for RTOs. Sadly, you need to actually consider how you're going to design those materials to be engaging. There's probably going to be a stronger focus moving forward on training materials in general, which I actually think is fantastic. This is definitely a response to feedback from RTOs of, we have spent so much time on assessment, we've regulated assessment. The problem is that because of that, a lot of RTOs have then, I guess, in their perspective, they would have said they had to forego a lot of the training in order to have time to do the assessment. My argument would probably be, you haven't designed the assessment very well. That's an argument to be had. But that does need to be considered in the process. So that's just a little bit about amount of training, guys. Within 1.1, we will also be going into the next one, which is about entry assessments, LLNs, determining the needs of your learners. That's going to be in the next episode. So yeah, that's kind of where we sit, guys. Please make sure, I'll link to the new standards below. If you haven't downloaded them, it is really, really important to download them. I think we've still got one more round of consultation. I'm not entirely sure about that. ASQA is also looking for RTOs to trial the new standards. So if you're interested in getting involved from that perspective, then I definitely recommend that you reach out to, I think, either Angus or Kai at ASQA. You can do that through the inquiries line. I'll put a note in that for below as well. Otherwise, if you don't have a TAS template or you do need some help developing your TAS, by all means, reach out to us. We do provide training sessions on this. We do have templates that are available for purchase. We do reviews on these sorts of things as well. So by all means, reach out to Lauren or Laura at NOI.org. Otherwise, guys, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, all of those good things below. I hope you guys have a fantastic day. This is Lauren Hollows for NOI Education Services.